Reverend Michael Mudgett has been a tireless champion of new churches. Since we launched Cyclical San Diego in September 2017, we've gathered over 100 discerners, starters, and established church leaders. Currently, we have 5 new worshiping communities in our starters cohort, representing over 300 people in membership at those new churches, 2/3 of who had no previous connection to a faith community. These 5 starter churches are impacting over 6,000 people outside of their churches through various Shalom initiatives. We have 2 starters on the cusp of launching new worshiping communities in the new year, and we're dreaming alongside 2 more discerners who may be able to start new worshiping communities of their own. Michael's vision, encouragement, wisdom, and support have been vital in helping Cyclical San Diego get to where we are in these 3 short years. Even as Michael prepares for retirement at the end of this year from his role as Executive Presbyter of the Presbytery of San Diego, as you'll hear in this interview, he continues to express deep and hopeful vision for the future. When you look back on the origins of Cyclical San Diego, what was it about church starting that made it feel like an important priority for you and for our presbytery?
Sure. Thanks, Daniel. It's good to be here with you today. It started, I think we launched it officially in 2017, but when I came on board as a new interim EP in late 2015, there was a strategic visioning team of the executive committee that was in place, and they were discerning the future, a vision for the presbytery. And over almost a year of several meetings and a lot of discussion, they came up with church planting as the way forward. And so I was part of that visioning team. And I didn't plan on remaining on as executive presbyter, but when they made that their priority, that just resonated with me and said, hey, if I am invited to serve as the full-time EP, that is the vision I will it's because of that vision. And so one thing came to it, one thing after another, and I became the EP. And it was because of their vision, their far-sighted vision of wanting to plant churches and raise up discerners and starters. So why do I think it's important, and what was the thinking of that strategic team? I think there are a couple things that made it a priority. One is the importance of communication. And there was a realization that we're just not reaching the unchurched. And our churches in our presbytery are growing smaller or maintaining, their present numbers, but they're not necessarily growing. So there's a whole group of unchurched, you've heard the word nuns, people not affiliated with a church, that we're just not reaching. So I think it's the recognition that younger church starters can communicate more effectively with the unchurched out in our culture. And so that was one of the reasons to make it a priority and give those potential church starters, the resources and the space to exercise this evangelical impulse. And, we need to be evangelical. We need, in the best sense of that word, taking the good news of Jesus Christ out into a culture that is devoid of it and that is broken and that needs good news, and people are looking for that. So that's one thing, communication. Second is mission. This is a great way for churches in our presbytery and beyond to support local missionaries. And I see this as a missionary project. As you, Daniel, the director, are in charge of bringing together and identifying discerners. People are discerning whether or not God's calling them to plant a church, and also bringing together a cohort of starters, people who have already crossed that bridge and want to plant a church. These folks are missionaries. Now, we don't plan to send them overseas, but we're going to send them out. Our presbytery is sending them out into our county, into different communities. So in a very real way, we are a mission sending organization. Cyclical San Diego, and you're being the director, are raising up missionaries. And so I think what a great legacy of our presbytery to be raising up and supporting missionaries out into our local areas. So that was another reason. And I think just renewal. Uh, it's in giving that we receive, and it's in renewing others that we are renewed. And just a short story on this: when I was at another church, I went down on a mission trip to the Amazon, and I went to the largest church in Brazil. It's a Presbyterian church, Manaus Presbyterian Church. And they've got 3 or 4 boats that ply the Amazon River, and what they do is they do church and they meet with people and they provide medical services, and they may or may not plant a church. Well, at the back of Manaus Presbyterian Church, there's this huge bulletin board with about 40 different photographs of brick and mortar churches that they have planted along the Amazon River. And there's a reason why that church is the largest church in Brazil, and it's alive and thriving. It's because they plant churches and they nurture those churches. So I think there's nothing but good things in store for the presbytery as we reach out into our community through Cyclical San Diego and plant those churches. So I think that was all part of the reasons we're making this a priority for our presbytery.
I really like that image of sending out local missionaries. I think a lot of folks can relate to whether it was a 2-week mission trip or supporting a long-term missionary who comes back, back in the day with a little photo slideshow, or these days on PowerPoint or Keynote. But there's something in our heart as Christians that we respond and to the love of God being shared around the world and people coming to know Christ. We love it. It's great. It's exciting. It's life-giving. And I know what you mean. There's no reason to not experience that kind of joy of being part of God's mission here in San Diego. And so I guess I'm wondering, for me, there's a lot of highlights in terms of your work as EP with Cyclical San Diego. But I'd love to hear you share maybe 1 or 2 things from the last 3 years of doing this work together. Maybe a couple of highlights that have stood out to you.
1 or 2? Is that all? 1 or 2? Well, there are a lot, and I would say the most fun I've had would be attending worship service at Anchor City is one. Attending worship service at Ebenezer is another. And I haven't gotten around to David Tran's enterprise, which is Table San Diego, but I will eventually. But just being at those church services where there's so much energy, love for the Lord, there's a newness. And, I think it's just that missionary impulse. I mean, there's nothing more exciting than bringing someone to faith in Jesus Christ. There just isn't. And that's why all of our churches send missionaries out. And so why wouldn't we send it out locally to share the good news of Jesus Christ? So when I see that done at Anchor City, and I've been part of the worship service at Ebenezer, I know that's what you folks are doing. So I'd say that's one of the highlights. Going to those free lunches that you put on for the cohorts of the starters and the discerners, and just being around those type of folks is exciting. You put those on, before the COVID hit, and you're still doing it. But it was really fun to meet at a restaurant around good food and good drink and great fellowship and good speakers. You bring in really good speakers to build and to speak into the lives of these discerners and these starters. And just for a guy my age to be around folks their age and with all that energy and the vision to reach the world for Jesus Christ, and knowing that it hasn't gotten old, that is the vision, and that is a calling that is for the young and the old, for the rich and the poor. It's our calling as Christians. So it is fun to be in their presence, and it was a privilege and an honor to be a part of those. So thank you for inviting me. I'm gonna go beyond just 2. A third one is, we're talking about, one of the highlights is watching the vision of 2015, the vision that came out of that strategic task force and approved by our executive committee, and then approved, to watch that vision become a reality. So over the past 5 years, I've watched this thing morph from words into an actual enterprise that is now reaching out into our community for Jesus Christ. And that is exciting. And it's gone from the vision to partnering with Cyclical Los Angeles who was our mentor and who coached us. It went from there to a full-blown director search, where we found you and invited you among several potential candidates. You were kind enough to say, yes, I'll be your first director. And then it went from there. We had to create some structures. So I tip my hat to Maurice Kasky and others who helped form a chapter in our Manual of Administrative Operations to come up with a chapter for Cyclical's committee. I tip my hat to Pastor Mike McClenahan for pushing to have a standing committee, a cyclical standing committee, exist in our presbytery that has a seat at the executive committee, so that part of our business now is talking about the vision of being a missionary group out into our community, of raising up church planters and walking alongside church discerners. So to watch that happen, then to watch you develop cohort lunches and dinners and raising up these people, and then to watch you bring on board Ebenezer and nurture them, and David Tran and Table San Diego, and we're just rolling. It's rolling. This train, the horse is out of the corral. The train's rolling down the track, and you're only 3 years into it. And so I just want to say thank you, San Diego Presbytery, for your prayers. Thank you, San Diego Presbytery, for funding and for the wisdom and the foresight, and just following the call of Jesus to create Cyclical San Diego. So anyway, those are all highlights, Daniel.
Yeah, Michael,
it's been fun to be a part of it. It's been a joy. It really has been.
Definitely. And I was just going to say, I feel like it's a Presbyterian value to be connectional, and there's kind of a mutual benefit from people who are maybe, first-time church planters or younger pastors and church leaders connecting with established pastors and church leaders. There's a synergy that happens, and like you said, I mean, for me, it's been, I don't know if it's funny to say it, but it's fun. It's exciting. There's always something new. And so as we're, and I really appreciate your reflections over the last couple of years. God has been doing a lot in and through this group. And so I'm wondering, as we kind of turn an eye to the future, as we said, you're wrapping up this chapter as serving as EP in our presbytery. But I know that your heart is to see this work continue forward, and maybe with that image of reframing this as local missionaries. This is heart language stuff that we get. So not just to the ends of the earth, but ends of the earth includes the ends of San Diego County as well. What are some ways that you could see this work continuing, or how an established church could wrap their arms around new church leaders?
Well, that's just it. They should wrap their arms around Cyclical San Diego and all of the discerners and the starters. We just need to appreciate and understand better, more fully, that our presbytery, we're not programmatic, but we do have 3 missions, okay? One is the Sudanese mission. The other is New Day. The third is Cyclical San Diego. It's one of our missions. And so Cyclical San Diego is a missionary enterprise, and that's how we can reframe it. We can look at it through that lens, because it's a very correct way to see it. We get excited as churches to send missionaries over to different continents. But, we do have a county here, and we have a neighborhood. Right at our doorstep, we have missions. And that sounds trite, but it's very true. And maybe this COVID has helped show us the brokenness in our society, in our culture. But we don't need to go beyond our county to see a need for missions and mission work. And so I think going forward, Daniel, what I would love to see is all of our churches, all 34 churches, embrace Cyclical San Diego, personally be engaged, and as a church, engage with Cyclical San Diego. Maybe extend a hand of fellowship and say, look, if one of your starters, if one of your discerners needs some office space, or if they would like to create a ministry within our church, they're invited to do that. Come on board. And you know what? We'll take them on as a missionary, and we'll look at them as one of our missionaries we send out into the community, not overseas, but into our community. And we'll support them with prayer. We'll support them financially. We'll support them by encouraging them and nurturing them. and coming alongside Cyclical San Diego. I'd love to see that happen. It's so imperative. And I think as we invest like that, it's in giving that we receive, that will redound to us as a presbytery so hundredfold. It will, in excitement, in new energy, and the Lord will bless it. So that's my prayer for San Diego Presbytery. That's my prayer for Cyclical San Diego. Yeah, it's happening. I'm seeing the rose blossom in the garden, and it's continuing to unfold. Let's not stop watering it prematurely. Let's continue to water it and watch what God is doing in this garden that He's planted here in San Diego. And Daniel, thank you for your leadership. You're a great leader. By example, through your love for Jesus and through your boldness to go out and speak the word of God and your leadership. So thank you very much.
Michael, I really appreciate that. And I think that's a great place to wrap up. I am reminded of where Paul talks about in the New Testament that one person plants and another person waters, but God is at work through all of it. And I know that not just as kind of a bookmark in history, but as living vision, we owe so much to your vision and hard work, being a champion for this work of starting new churches. And so I'll always be grateful that you help plant those seeds and water them. And we know that God is going to keep helping it to grow. And so I thank you for your faithful service. And I'm excited for everything for you that is ahead, and for the good work that's here in Cyclical San Diego as well.
Hey, thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure talking with you today.